And so again, like we've talked about this a lot, is that not everything that causes your body to lose body fat is inherently good for you, right? Sometimes the loss of body fat is a response to a deficiency, because in a perfect world with a perfect diet, you wouldn't be losing or gaining body fat. You just sort of, the losing isn't an optimal state, right? Shrinking away is not an optimal state.
Bringing you a reasoned approach to health and fitness. This is the Phi Life Podcast.
Welcome to the Phi Life Podcast. I'm John Barban. With me is Brad Pilon, and today we're going to talk about the sugar diet.
The sugar diet. Yeah. So the sugar diet is interesting because it is literally exactly that. We have a large group of influencers now who are like, hey, screw this carnivore thing. I'm going all sugar. And it is actually causing decent amount of fat loss, which I'll explain in a minute. But I find it interesting because you and I have been going on for almost a year now about sort of the frugivore history of humans. And based on our physiology, based on structure of our teeth or GI system, it's sort of obvious to us that we were frugivore or fruit eating a long, long time ago. But with the exception of our very, very low pH of our stomachs, which suggests we were actually frugivore scavengers. So we did eat meat, and at times large amounts, because we chased a bunch of things away from a dead carcass and ate what was left. The frugivore diet is basically just the big middle finger to the carnivore diet, right? And these guys are like, no, forget it. I'm going to eat Twizzler. They could take it to the extreme because the extreme will sell. So as I'm eating Twizzlers for breakfast and that sort of thing, and I'm losing weight. I'm not going to point out the fact that a lot of the guys who are large proponents of this were carnivores 6 months ago, because it just kind of shows they jump. The reason I'm not going to harp on that is because a lot of times they're not claimed to be experts. That's what they're doing, right? So they're hopefully we'll figure out that if you jump to enough things and still see enough results, that it's not really what you were doing that was causing results. It was just sort of your entire lifestyle. But what I wanted to point out about this diet is that it is actually a protein restricted diet. So their protein intake is very low. So they're not doing, so if we were to do the sugar diet, we would probably do it where, at least once or twice a week, we'd hit like 120, 150 grams of protein, and we'd protein burst it, right? That kind of anabolic fasting that we do. But they're not doing that. That is why they're seeing fat loss, is because there is a lot of research on a very, very low protein diet causing fat loss. Just like there's research on a low carbohydrate diet causing fat loss, or even a low fat diet causing fat loss. This is because you're causing a deficiency. Right. And so, again, like we've talked about this a lot, is that not everything that causes your body to lose body fat is inherently good for you. Right. Sometimes the loss of body fat is a response to a deficiency, because in a perfect world with a perfect diet, you wouldn't be losing or gaining body fat. You just sort of, the losing isn't an optimal state, right? Shrinking away is not an optimal state. So it's a response to a less than optimal situation, which is why you can do these things to get lean, sometimes even very lean, but you can't do them always. So I think the sugar diet is a great example. Again, it's something you and I are going to talk about more later, but we're way more robust than people give us credit for. Right? We're not these fragile machines that break if we have a little bit of starchy carbs, right? We don't break if you have an Oreo. So you can go from being a carnivore for 8-9 months eating only red meat, and you can switch around and be like, screw it, I'm living off of mangoes and Twizzlers. And you can probably still get results as long as the rest of the millions upon millions of inputs that are your lifestyle and your workouts, et cetera, are in play. So keep in mind, when people do carnivore or the sugar diet, if you know about it, because they're an influencer, right? They're online, which means a large chunk of their life is dedicated to health and fitness. So this is the one big input we're all talking about, but don't forget the rest of their life is based around good sleep habits, and they're hitting the gym hard, and their diet is more or less controlled, or at least you can't measure your diet and not throw a bit of control into it. Right? Yeah. It's impossible. As a human being, you can't be like, I'm measuring every single thing I eat to see what's happening. It's a level of awareness that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So I think a sugar diet's a great example of one, just doing a complete 180 in what's popular can still get you results. Two, that these people jumping back and forth from diets are kind of proving the robustness of the human body to begin with, that we are capable of adapting to many different diets, which is how we spread over the entire globe. Right. And then just three is that then anyone who's saying that there is one absolute best diet is obviously wrong. Right. Like it's for the terms of weight loss, et cetera, because weight loss isn't necessarily health. So there might be a perfect healthy diet. Sure. But when it comes to gaining weight via muscle or losing fat via fat, there's multiple ways you can do it. That's what we're seeing.
It's to me, they just need to do something counterculture, just different.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So and that's two: eat sugar and low protein.
Yeah.
Since when is anyone promoting a low protein diet?
I think we called a low protein diet. I'm sure I could look back on our blog.
Oh, we did. Long time ago. We said at some point this is going to be the
golden child will be the bad child. Yeah.
The opposite thing, because everything else has been done: low fat, low carb.
Yeah.
Vegetarian, vegan, just all of these, everything you can think of. The only thing most people have never considered is low protein, but here it is.
It's just like everything else, right? But plaid, when we were in high school, plaid was like this counterculture grunge Seattle thing. Everyone started wearing plaid. The minute everyone started wearing plaid, including your parents, you stopped wearing plaid, right? Yeah. So now every single person's on some version of protein's good for you, high protein. Someone out there is going to be like, all right, I'm going to check this out. What happens if I don't eat any?
It could be just a side effect of needing to get attention in a sea of influencers trying to get attention. And you're just going to gloss over the 100th person to say the exact same thing when it comes to
and I bet you it'll work. I bet you by when are we recording this? Sort of like summer. By the time this hits, people probably heard of the sugar diet.
Yeah.
Like I bet you it's good because it is that counterculture. And it's not wrong. I think people can survive, especially when it's debatable when people say they're eating really low protein, how low they're actually going.
Yeah.
But
the other thing is, are they doing any of this? They may not be. And it gives people the license to just eat junk if they want. If they want to.
Sour Patch Kids and Twizzlers. Sure.
So I don't know. It's another one of these. I don't even know why people follow any of this stuff anymore. It's especially if you don't test any of it in your own body. Like we always come back to testing. You may be able to do that if you want, but see what happens.
Yeah.
If you're paying attention to this at all.
The same jacked guy or shredded woman can be jacked and shredded on carnivore and then flip and be jacked and shredded, even more jacked or more shredded on the sugar diet. Then you kind of should realize, I can kind of do whichever one works best for me then, because they've gone full spectrum. It is interesting to me because we did do, you and I did like a year's worth of work on frugivore and the history of sort of our ancestors' eating styles based on what we can figure out. And frugivore came up, but then you and I were the ones who were like, there is that scavenger component. We weren't fruitarians, right? It wasn't just fruit. There was a small amount of protein throughout most days. It was a goal. And then on really good days, there was a whack load, right? So that kind of got us into anabolic fasting where it was like, hey, once or twice a week, you can hit a large dose. And now I'm actually seeing a lot of people in the protein research field kind of going to it. We talked about it earlier, which was like if your protein's kind of a rolling average of around 90 to 100 grams if you average out your week's intake and it kind of came to that per day, you're fine. So I'm sure there's a way to do a low protein diet with blips of high protein that'll probably work just as great. So
all of this micro measuring of how much protein per day, then is it how much protein per meal? Then is it how much protein per bite?
Yeah.
Like how more acutely do you want to break this thing down? So like rolling averages over a few weeks, you could mess around for a week or two and come up with all kinds of weird things to prove it did this or did that. But what happens 12 weeks from now? What happens 6 months from now? Is any of it sustainable? Like you could probably do the sugar thing for a few weeks. Yeah. Like you said, especially
it'd be fun for a month or two, probably.
Sure.
Right?
Especially if it's coming from people who you could argue many of them probably have everything else dialed in.
Yep.
They're already fit. They already have a good workout habit. They probably already, they got things more or less sorted out. If they're in the business of being fitness influencers, they probably have it all sorted. They probably already have a low body fat level. They have good muscle development. They probably can get away with it for a month, and it might actually do something interesting.
Yeah, it's not some random couch potato who's just finished watching, binge watching Netflix and thought, you know what? If I just stay on this couch but don't eat any more protein, I'll get shredded. That's not how this happened, right? It was someone who's already dialed in. And again, they're just showing how robust the human machine can be, right? So they're not wrong, and neither are the people who went the other direction. The only thing they're wrong about is that it's, carnivores will still say this is the only way, and the sugar people will say theirs is the only way, and they're just proving that there is no only way, right? So yeah, robust.
It also could be them just doing some self-discovery, but on camera.
That's what a lot of people are doing, right? They're just going through their discovery of health and fitness, but recording it daily.
Yeah, and most of them aren't in a lab doing research. It's not that. They're just kind of fiddling and seeing what happens. They just happen to be in good enough shape that people will pay attention to them.
Exactly. I'm wondering, is the trend of diet for a lot of people because the actual workout component might be the larger driving factor, and that's harder, right? Like me deciding to go pure sugar diet or go pure carnivore, be vegan, give up on vegan, it's relatively easy. It's changing my shopping habits, really, right? Figuring out the gym.
Well, hang on, I'm gonna stop you right there.
Yeah.
That is not in conjunction with eating more or less. That's just changing what you're eating.
Changing what you're eating.
Yeah, I was going to say eating less is almost impossible.
No, yeah, I'm going by the style.
Yes, changing categories. It's like, I'm just going to crush carnivore this month and then crush sugar next month. That's actually not that hard.
No, but figuring out what you're actually supposed to be doing in the gym, I still think is hard, and it's neglected, even though everybody thinks they have it figured out. And then learning to push really, really hard without breaking for extended periods of time is really, really hard. The monotony of just doing that for 12, 16 weeks and then the rest of your life is hard. And then to your point, eating less, it's hard. It's not hard for the first couple of weeks, but it's to do that for the rest of your life is difficult. It's very easy to gain weight, right? Like just be like, screw it, I'm gonna eat whatever I want, money provided. But the keeping calories low and really figuring out the movement aspect of this is less sexy, but also much harder than just changing what you're eating on your spreadsheet.
So have you seen, are any of these people referencing a study or something, or is it just somebody tried it, or what's the root of it?
You and I came across trials a while back about keeping branched chain amino acids to almost zero and it increased fat burning. I remember you and I reviewing that, and we did review ones on very low protein diets causing an increased metabolic rate. I remember us talking about that.
Where did the sugar part come from?
So I think if you're going to go low on protein, the sugar part, it could be the frugivore data. It could be, I imagine, again, there's that entire branch of research that's looking at optimal performance in the way of endurance training, which is still sugar research. I'm sure there's tons there where someone who was probably, into carnivore, but also a runner or something, and was looking through that research and going, what the hell am I doing? Right. And then, so it's kind of, I don't know if you remember most of the research came out in the 80s and 90s, and it always talked about like exercise and sport and diet. But the problem was exercise was always running or cycling, because that was really trendy at the time. So you're like, well, come on, like give us some weight training. Where now it's almost flipped and everything's about building muscle mass. There's less on, it'll swing back.
There's no like landmark paper that
I haven't
these
gone
people
that
all
deep into it.
Jumped on. Yeah. Well, if there was, they probably all would be referencing it.
But I think part of the jump may be because we've put down sort of cardiovascular training for a while there, is similar to how the sugar diet is a rebuttal to the sort of carnivore lifestyle. It may be also people looking at the leaders of the carnivore movement and being like, you guys are a bunch of meatheads, right? They're just, I'm a runner. Like I don't want to be some giant 280-pound muscle ball, right? I want to be able to run or row or swim. Like I think maybe that's coming back in the style as well. And this is kind of a you meatheads can have your all meat diet. We're doing this, but it's not a, sort of the foo, you guys are big, tough lifters were kind of runners. It's more of a hardcore running comeback.
I wonder if it's people who've been dieting or trying carnivore or any of that stuff and finally arrive back at allowing themselves to eat carbs and realizing how much better a workout feels when you just eat.
I think it's a large part of it. Yeah, especially if they do if they're high volume people or they are runners or so, that kind of thing. Like it's, and then I think also it's the people who took their advice, jumped to 400 grams of protein a day for a couple of months, looked in the mirror and they're like, I look the same. So what happens if I go the opposite direction? That kind of thinking.
Yeah, that's what I mean by just it's them on self-discovery and scaring themselves into not eating carbs, then adding carbs back in and, oh, there's nothing wrong. And then thinking, oh, maybe this is a new thing, which never went away. Carbs is, it's carbohydrates are the preferred fuel source for any sort of exercise. It's not, fat doesn't do it. I mean, it's good for, fat's useful, I guess, for ultra endurance, I guess. But that's not it. Like any sort of exercise any normal person's doing, you're going to feel way better if you're eating enough carbs than if you're depleting the amount of carbs you're eating.
Yeah. And then I think if you go hardcore no carb, which is very popular for weight loss, but thanks to the internet and Instagram, you can look at dozens and dozens of influencers who still eat carbs but look great. And you're like, well, hold on. But you gave this absolute answer that it was the carbs causing me to be fat, but that couple there eat carbs and they're shredded, so it can't be it. So I think that comes into play as well. I like your self-discovery. I think it is maybe a lot of people kind of slowly realizing a bit of the lie of protein, right? Mm-hmm. So very easy to go on a whole bunch of tests and just say 400 grams of protein a day did this, right? Yeah. So, and then people go on 400 grams and be like, that didn't do anything. It's almost like a natural human instinct to be like, well, I wonder what less will do then. So be interesting to track and watch. Maybe we'll do a follow-up in like 3 months of where to go. Might have fizzled out, might have been a big thing. So but just thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah, so don't do a sugar diet is the actual answer. Eat whatever you want, but there's nothing magical to lowering your protein and increasing sugar intake. It's just somebody somewhere is latched onto it as a gimmick for now.
Yeah, it's just one of those ones that just like everything else, it'll blend into just another way you can eat and get results if you got everything else dialed in.
Yep. I think that's a good place to leave it.
Yep. All right.
So for Brad Pilon, I'm John Barban, and that's your Phi Life Podcast.